Darkness falls earlier. The wind whispers through the trees. Pumpkins glow like ancient warnings. Every year, at the end of October, millions of people around the world celebrate Halloween. They wear costumes, light candles, carve pumpkins, and laugh at things that once terrified entire civilizations. But beneath the candy and costumes lies a forgotten truth. Halloween wasn't always about fun. It began as a night of blood, fear, and sacrifice. A night when the line between the living and the dead was said to vanish. This is the story of Samhain, the Celtic festival that became Halloween. A tale of gods and ghosts, massacres and rebirth, and how humanity turned one of its darkest rituals into a night of laughter. Welcome to ANTI-NICHEE, where we explore the stories that no single niche can contain. Long before Halloween parties, before trick-or-treat, and centuries before Christianity reached Europe, there was Samhain. For the ancient Celts, who lived across Ireland, Scotland, and parts of France, Samhain marked the end of summer and the beginning of winter, the death of the light and the birth of darkness. But Samhain wasn't just a date on the calendar. It was a spiritual threshold, a time when the border between worlds, the living and the dead, grew dangerously thin. According to Celtic belief, on this night the spirits of the deceased wandered freely across the earth. Some came to visit loved ones. Others, vengeful and lost, sought to drag the living back with them. That's why villagers left food outside their doors, hoping to appease the spirits and avoid their wrath. Fires were lit on the hills to ward off the shadows, and Druids, the Celtic priests, performed sacred rituals to protect their people from whatever might emerge from the mist. But Samhain was not only spiritual, it was also bloody. To ensure good harvests and protection through the winter, the Celts made animal sacrifices and sometimes even human ones. The fires of Samhain were said to burn red with blood. It was a night of fear, faith, and fate. A night when even the bravest warriors refused to sleep alone. When the Roman Empire expanded into Celtic lands around 43 BC, it didn't destroy Samhain, it absorbed it. Like many pagan traditions, it was too deeply rooted to erase. Instead, the Romans blended Samhain with their own festivals. Feralia, a day when Romans honored the spirits of the dead, and Pomona, a celebration of the harvest goddess whose symbol was the apple. That's right, the reason we bob for apples on Halloween comes from Pomona, not pumpkins. The Romans were masters of cultural assimilation. They understood that to rule people, you didn't take away their beliefs, you reshaped them. So, as Roman temples replaced Druid circles, and Latin prayers echoed over Celtic fields, Samhain transformed. The fires still burned, but the meaning behind them began to shift, from ritual sacrifice to symbolic offering, from fear of death to remembrance of the dead. By the time Christianity began to spread across Europe, Samhain was no longer just a Celtic festival. It had become something else, a hybrid of pagan and Roman belief, a perfect vessel for yet another transformation. In the 7th century, the Christian church faced a dilemma. How do you erase ancient pagan festivals? When people refuse to give them up, you don't erase them, you rename them. In 609 AD, Pope Boniface IV declared All Saints' Day, a day to honor all Christian martyrs and saints. But centuries later, Pope Gregory III moved it to November 1st, aligning it perfectly with Samhain. The night before became known as All Hallows' Eve, and eventually Halloween. Under the church's influence, the fires of Samhain turned into candlelight in cathedrals. The offerings to the dead became prayers for souls in purgatory, and the roaming spirits, they became demons and devils in the Christian imagination. But even as the church baptized the festival, it could never completely tame it. In remote villages of Ireland and Scotland, the old traditions lived on. Masked processions, bonfires, and stories of ghosts returning from the grave. The line between religion and superstition blurred, and Halloween became a night caught between heaven and hell. When we think of Halloween today, we picture witches, old women on broomsticks, pointed hats, black cats at their feet. But these images didn't appear by chance. They are the result of centuries of demonization. In the 5th-10th century, a Dominican monk named Heinrich Kramer published the infamous Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. It was a manual for identifying and destroying witches, and its impact was catastrophic. Kramer wrote that women were naturally weak, susceptible to the devil, and that they made pacts with demons, flew on broomsticks, stole, and ate children. None of this was true, but it was believed. Over 60,000 people in Europe were executed as witches. Most were women. Many were old, poor, or living alone. Why? Because they possessed knowledge the church could not control. Midwives, healers, herbalists, women working with plants to cure illness, living independently of the patriarchal system. They were branded witches, allies of the devil, enemies of God. And thus, the archetype of the witch was born. The evil old woman, the seductress, the demoness. But the truth was far darker. These women were victims of a system designed to maintain power and control. The witch hunts didn't end until the 18th century, but the image remained, and it merged with Halloween. The witch became a symbol of the night, a synonym for evil, the perfect Halloween costume. Behind the playful masks lies a grim reality, a story of fear, power, and systematic destruction. Humans have an undeniable fascination with death. From the moment we become aware of our own mortality, we are drawn to stories, rituals, and experiences that confront the unknown. Halloween, more than any other modern celebration, taps directly into this primal curiosity. It is a festival that allows us to face fear in a controlled, almost playful environment. But why are we so captivated by things that terrify us? Psychologists have long studied this paradox. On one hand, fear is a protective mechanism. It keeps us alive, alert, and cautious. Evolutionarily, humans who were attuned to danger were more likely to survive predators, natural disasters, and hostile forces. Fear triggers a rush of adrenaline, heightening our senses and preparing our bodies for fight or flight. It is an intensely personal and physical experience, one that reminds us we are alive. On the other hand, humans are inexplicably drawn to fear, even when it poses no real threat. Horror movies, haunted houses, and haunted hayrides all tap into this phenomenon known as controlled fear. We deliberately expose ourselves to frightening stimuli because we know, at some level, that we are safe. The danger is simulated. The ghosts are fake. The monsters are actors in makeup or clever special effects. And yet, the body reacts as if the threat were real, heart racing, palms sweating, a chill crawling down the spine. Halloween amplifies this dynamic. Masks, costumes, and dark settings create a safe space for confronting death and the unknown. When we wear a mask, we are no longer ourselves. We take on a new identity, one that can act without the usual social constraints. Psychologists call this de-individuation. In a mask, people feel emboldened to take risks, act mischievously, or explore the limits of their behavior. The same phenomenon explains why children play pranks on trick-or-treat night and why adults sometimes indulge in harmless mischief, from playful scares to elaborate haunted house pranks. But there is another layer to the psychology of Halloween, the thrill of storytelling. From ghost stories told around campfires to horror films projected on cinema screens, humans are wired to respond to suspense and danger in narratives. Stories of witches, vampires, and ghosts allow us to experience fear from a distance, rehearsing our emotional responses without real-life consequences. This rehearsal can actually improve emotional resilience. Studies suggest that individuals who engage with horror, whether through books, movies, or haunted attractions, often develop better coping mechanisms for stress and uncertainty. They practice encountering danger in a controlled way, which can translate into real-world benefits. The symbolism of Halloween masks goes even deeper. When we disguise ourselves as skeletons, monsters, or mythical creatures, we are not just hiding, we are confronting our mortality. The skeletons are reminders of death, the vampires of predation, and the eternal cycle of life, the witches of human ingenuity and taboo knowledge. By embodying these symbols, we engage with the darker aspects of life in a form that is socially acceptable and even entertaining. It is a ritualized confrontation with death, packaged as fun. There is, however, a risk. When identity is obscured, social norms weaken. While Halloween encouraged playful rebellion, it can also blur moral boundaries. Historically, this masking of identity has been associated with mischief, vandalism, and occasionally violence. The anonymity of a mask can embolden people to act in ways they normally would not, an aspect that makes Halloween a uniquely human experiment in fear, morality, and behavior. Finally, Halloween fulfills a need for collective experience. Fear, when shared, becomes a bond. Communities gather to decorate, to parade, to tell stories and share scares. In darkness, people find connection. There's a paradoxical comfort in confronting the scary together. The unknown becomes slightly less threatening when others face it with you. Halloween, therefore, is not only a personal psychological experience, it is a social one. It teaches lessons about courage, creativity, and the shared human experience of mortality. In essence, Halloween is a complex interplay of biology, psychology, and culture. It is a night where we confront the inevitable death, fear, and the unknown, but do so under controlled conditions, allowing us to explore emotions safely. It is a celebration of our fascination with mortality, a rehearsal for the unknown, and a shared ritual that binds communities through fear and fun. The masks we wear, the rituals we perform, and the stories we tell are not mere entertainment. They are expressions of the deepest human truths, encoded in the language of fright. Halloween as we know it today would be incomplete without the influence of literature, cinema, and popular culture. The holiday is not merely about costumes and candy. It is deeply intertwined with the human fascination with the macabre. Horror, in all its forms, has shaped how we perceive Halloween, how we experience fear, and how we ritualize our confrontation with death. The roots of modern horror can be traced back to the literary movements of the 18th and 19th centuries. Gothic literature introduced audiences to dark, mysterious settings and supernatural elements that evoked both terror and fascination. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein 1818 told the story of a creature assembled from dead bodies, exploring themes of mortality, creation, and human ambition. Bram Stoker's Dracula 1897 introduced the vampire as a symbol of immortality, predation, and desire, blending the fear of death with erotic undertones. These works did more than entertain. They created archetypes that persist in our cultural imagination, forming the foundation for countless stories of fear and suspense. As printing and literacy spread, horror narratives became a medium for exploring taboo subjects: death, the afterlife, the supernatural without facing real-world consequences. Novels and short stories allowed people to encounter danger safely, rehearsing emotions that would otherwise be overwhelming. They also reflected societal anxieties. Fears of disease, social collapse, or moral decay were often personified in monsters and ghouls. Halloween, in this context, became a cultural lens through which communities could process the darker aspects of human existence. The transition from literature to cinema further amplified Halloween's association with horror. Early silent films, like Nosferatu 1922, brought the vampire to life on screen, transforming fear into a visual and immersive experience. By the 1930s, Hollywood had fully embraced monsters with films such as Dracula 1931 and Frankenstein 1931, cementing the iconography of horror. Pale faces, fangs, stitched flesh, and haunted castles. These cinematic monsters were not just entertainment. They were modern myths, symbols that encapsulated our collective anxieties and cultural narratives. The 1960s marked a turning point. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho 1960 demonstrated that true horror need not rely on supernatural elements. The human mind itself could terrify. Violence, psychological tension, and suspense became as powerful as any ghost or vampire. The horror genre expanded to explore morality, guilt, obsession, and the fragility of social order. Films blurred the line between fear and fascination, drawing audiences into narratives where survival was uncertain and evil could emerge from the ordinary. Then came the slasher films of the 1970s and 1980s, epitomized by John Carpenter's Halloween 1978. The masked killer, silent and relentless, became an icon of fear. The anonymity of the mask mirrored the anonymity of the dark forces humans had feared for centuries: spirits, witches, and demons. The slasher genre also reflected social anxieties, from the consequences of breaking societal norms to the fragility of domestic safety. By aligning the film with the holiday, Carpenter created a feedback loop. Halloween as a cultural event reinforced horror, and horror reinforced Halloween. Masks, suspense, and fear became inseparable from the holiday itself. Beyond films, music, television, and media further solidified Halloween's association with horror. Songs like Monster Mash offered playful interaction with the macabre, while TV specials, haunted attractions, and magazines disseminated horror imagery to the public. Every generation of children and adults learned, through these media, that Halloween was the time when the uncanny, the frightening, and the forbidden could safely enter the public sphere. Horror culture also serves as a mirror for our fascination with mortality. The monsters, the vampires, the witches, and the undead are all reminders that life is finite. By confronting these symbols in a controlled, cultural context, we explore our own fears, desires, and moral boundaries. The adrenaline, excitement, and laughter associated with Halloween are deeply entwined with these reflections. In essence, horror as a cultural phenomenon allows us to engage with the existential realities of life and death, turning fear into an experience that is not only thrilling but also socially and psychologically meaningful. Halloween, therefore, is more than a festival. It is a celebration of fear, imagination, and mortality. From gothic novels to slasher films, from eerie songs to haunted houses, horror culture has shaped the way we approach the unknown. It teaches us that confronting fear can be exhilarating, that the darkness can be playful, and that through shared cultural experiences, humans can turn anxiety into art, ritual, and celebration. Through horror, Halloween becomes a lens for understanding ourselves, our anxieties, our creativity, and our need for ritual. It is a night that reminds us that life is fragile, death is inevitable, and that, paradoxically, acknowledging these truths can allow us to live more fully. In masks and stories, in scares and screams, we find a reflection of our deepest fears and a way to dance with them safely. Together, as a community, we have reached the end of our journey through the history, rituals, and cultural evolution of Halloween. Yet, one fundamental question remains: what are we truly celebrating when we participate in this night of masks, lights, and frights? On the surface, Halloween appears to be a harmless holiday, a commercial event filled with candy, costumes, parties, and entertainment. It is easy to dismiss it as merely a fun occasion for children to dress up and ask for sweets. But beneath this cheerful facade lies a much deeper, older tradition, one that reaches back thousands of years into the fears, beliefs, and rituals of our ancestors. The Celts believed that on the night of Samhain, the boundary between the living and the dead became thin. Spirits could return to the world of the living, and supernatural forces walked among the people. Fire, masks, and sacrifices were not entertainment. They were measures of protection, rituals intended to maintain balance and ensure survival. Even when the Church adapted these traditions into All Hallows' Eve, the underlying reverence and the fear persisted. Perhaps, in some way, we still carry this awareness. We may not consciously believe in spirits or AOSC anymore. Yet, Halloween evokes a fascination with mortality that is both timeless and universal. We dress in masks, sometimes grotesque, sometimes whimsical, but always transformative. We temporarily step outside our usual identities, exploring the edges of who we are and who we dare to be. In this act of transformation, we are echoing the ancient practices of those who donned animal hides and painted their faces with ash. We confront danger, chaos, and the unknown in a safe and controlled environment. Halloween is also a collective confrontation with fear. By coming together to celebrate the eerie and the supernatural, we acknowledge our shared mortality, our shared anxieties, and our shared curiosity about what lies beyond life. It is a social ritual as much as a cultural one, a way for communities to ritualize the unknown, to transform dread into delight, and to connect across generations. The masks, the haunted houses, the stories of ghosts and witches, all are part of a dialogue between the living and the concept of death itself. Even the commercialization of Halloween, while often criticized, serves to reinforce these themes in unexpected ways. The candy, decorations, and media spectacles create a framework in which fear, play, and creativity coexist. Children trick or treat with glee. Adults immerse themselves in elaborate costumes, and entire neighborhoods transform into theatrical landscapes of the macabre. Within this controlled chaos, we reenact the ancient rituals of protection, transformation, and respect for the unknown. We may no longer sacrifice animals or light ritual fires, but the underlying psychological and cultural functions remain remarkably similar. At its core, Halloween is a celebration of life through the lens of death. It reminds us that life is fleeting, that the boundaries between the known and unknown are porous, and that fear is not merely to be avoided but explored, understood, and ritualized. In masks and costumes, we experience a kind of controlled liberation. We act out scenarios of power, danger, and mischief that are forbidden in daily life. In doing so, we confront the fundamental truths of human existence, mortality, identity, and the mysteries that lie just beyond perception. Perhaps this is why Halloween continues to captivate the imagination of so many. Across cultures and generations, it is a night in which we embrace paradox, fear and fun, death and celebration, horror and creativity. It is a night where we admit, without pretense, that we do not fully understand life or what comes after, yet we engage with it playfully, courageously, and collectively. Ultimately, Halloween is not gone, nor has it been entirely transformed. It has adapted, evolved, and commercialized, but the essence remains. The fear, the fascination, the longing to touch the unknown. These are the threads that connect our contemporary festivities with the rituals of Druids, the prayers of medieval Christians, and the terror of those who witnessed the horrors of history. Halloween is perhaps the most honest night of the year, a night in which we acknowledge our fears, our mortality, and our desire for connection, transformation, and ritual. It is a night in which we perform, play, and prepare not because we love death, but because it comes inevitably. And when it comes, we wish to meet it with a mask and a shared understanding that, in some way, we are ready,